Welcome to the Leadership Reckoning Room, the space where leaders are brave enough to look in the mirror and do the real work. I'm Steph, and today we step out of the corporate office and onto the field and light the lantern with a woman who has shaped a program, a generation of athletes, and the very definition of what it means to lead with both fire and care. Sierra Slack is the head coach of Occidental Women's Lacrosse and one of the most decorated athletes in the program's history, holding the all-time records in goals and points, earning multiple first-team All-SCIAC and All-Region honors, and receiving the Roy Dennis Award as one of the top student athletes in the entire department. As head coach, she's led the Tigers to back-to-back SCIAC tournament appearances. She's coached All-SCIAC and All-Region players and built a culture where young women learn to compete, to trust themselves, and to rise. But titles and records aren't why she's here. Sierra is the kind of coach who leads from legacy and lifts others with her. She knows that confidence is something you build, not something you hope for. She's the kind of coach that brings out the best in young women and the kind of coach who never asks for a standard that she isn't willing to model herself. She's the kind of leader we need all leaders and coaches to be. So step in, drop the armor, pick up your lacrosse sticks, and step into the reckoning with us. Hi, Cece. It's nice to see you today.
Good to see you. I feel in my Everyone Watches Women's Sports shirt.
That's right. That's right. Fierce. And I wore my Occidental Lacrosse sweatshirt. I have to represent and have my Oxy cup. Huge fan of Occidental college in general, but Occidental Lacrosse, I'll just say right up front, my daughter plays for you, and she was recruited and she chose Oxy because of the culture of the school and the team. And you have built such an amazing program where young women can thrive, they can take risks, and they can be themselves, and they grow. And I wanted you on here for a number of reasons, but I appreciate that as a lacrosse mom. I appreciate it as a former athlete. I appreciate it as a leader, because coaching really is, it's so critically important in building the leadership skills and the confidence in young athletes and young kids and students as they're growing through college and then going into whatever world or whatever discipline they choose to go live their lives doing. So thank you. I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And when you're saying that, I have to ring the bells of my previous coaches who I really feel like I grabbed the torch from here. So Steph Janice Marks, who was my head coach when I was here. When I got here, it's really funny how the athletes would tell me about a lot of the structures that were in place to make our athletes successful that I've been doing since I was a coach because my head coach did it. And then Hannah Kin, who recruited Liv, who took the torch from Steph and trained me when I was an assistant under her. And so when I got back here as the head coach and they would tell me about some of the things that they really wanted to keep around, I just giggled to myself because it was all stuff that I planned to continue and was already doing with my previous institution before here.
Yeah, that's right. You were a coach before Oxy. Maybe mentioned where you were a coach before. I wanted to say that, but I figured, listen, with all your accolades and all your awards and all the things that you do, I figured the intro would be the whole podcast. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to also just share where you had coached prior.
Yeah, so graduated from Oxy, coached under Hannah as the assistant here at Oxy, and then I went back to the East Coast. I'm from New Jersey, so I coached at Fairleigh Dickinson University in the Morristown area and was there for 3 years. My third year, I became the interim head coach, and then the interim tag got taken off, and then Oxy opened up that summer and had always been a dream for me. So that's my quick journey back.
That's incredible. It's funny. There's such a commonality between corporate and coaching athletics. I was like early on, I was an interim manager and then I became the manager. Like it's just that transition is interesting and so similar. And so like my first question for you is, just moving from an athlete to a coach, it's exactly like moving from an IC or an individual contributor to being a manager. And when did you know you wanted to become a coach? And what were the reasons behind your decision? And I'll ask the last question so you can answer all of them at the same time. But how hard has it been to make this transition? And I say that because I remember very vividly moving from being an IC to a manager for the first time at Microsoft. And I remember saying, I'm not going to lose. I was in engineering. I'm not going to lose my technical skills. I'm still going to test software. I'm still going to do all these things. And the reality is, it's not about you anymore when you move into a leadership position. It's about lifting those that are you're lucky enough to work with or manage or lead. And so I learned very quickly you can't, the focus has to shift. You have to learn how to delegate. You have to learn how to drive impact and results through others versus it being you. And so as a coach, what was that like moving into the from an athlete and playing and being a star player at that into being a coach?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think at first, I don't know when I really knew I wanted to be a coach. I had gone back every summer and coached club. I would do private trainings, and that always came really naturally to me and lit me up. But I have to give props to Hannah and like kind of drawing me right back after I graduated. I was a little unsure, and she was like, just come volunteer. And once I had a foot here, I just knew this is where I wanted to be, and the impact that you can have on folks does something else for me.
Yeah.
The transition wise, I think a lot of things come really naturally when you've been able to have a leadership role in a smaller capacity on a team as a captain. I
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like the part of really connecting with my athletes, and a lot of the first parts of coaching, that transition was quite easy. I think, like you said, it is a very different shift. And so I think the part where now you're not on a full team and you have all of these folks behind you, where it can be a little lonely, you really need to like zoom out a lot, be able to look at the big picture and the small, tiny little steps that it takes to get everything. I think that's the was the hardest transition, and still is for me, is being able to simultaneously zoom out and think about every minute detail on the day to day of what we're doing and how that will make us successful. And that takes a lot of behind the scenes planning and with myself and my staff. And so I don't know. Yeah, I'd say that.
That's that's interesting that you say that, because that's one of the most difficult skills in general to master, is the ability to see strategically and then also dive down into the weeds and then move up against to strategy and then go back down into the details. And you have to do that so many times a day in whatever leadership capacity that you're in, so that everything's connected and that everything moves smoothly, and that your players or your employees know what they are working towards and the goal and the North Star of what the strategy is and what the mission is kind of for the team, and what values that you're basing your leadership in, and what values you want your program to be held to. That's something that I think is really important for leaders to understand, is you always need to ground your style in your values and the values that you want your team to represent, for sure. And that's difficult. But if you can get that, then you can build trust, you can build psychological safety, you can build clarity, because everybody knows the direction that they're going. And the other thing that you mentioned that I think is really important is the reality of going into leadership, again, not just for yourself, because it's not about the cash and prizes. I tell everybody that. It has to be about the fact that you genuinely and authentically, passionately want to grow other human beings and make them better and set them up for wherever they want to go and whatever they want to do. So, one of the things I was going to ask about is, when you think about the young women who come through your program, what do you see as your core responsibility to them, not just as athletes, but as humans? And I just I think that this day and age, and I'll ask another question about this a little bit later, but this day and age with social media and everything that all young adults have to deal with, but young women specifically have to deal with. What are the things that you feel are your core responsibility to them as young human beings, not just athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the answer with your question. I think I talk to every recruit about and their families about how here they are a human first, and so my primary goal is making sure that everyone's a happy and healthy human. I don't think any team, and you're extrapolating this a lot to corporate, like I don't think any team can function well if that's not the baseline. We check a lot of boxes in our individual meetings that are not about lacrosse in the slightest. And so myself, I take very seriously that I'm a kind of checkpoint for our athletes, and I can be just someone to push them towards resources or just be a sounding board, or whatever they might need to just get through what they are dealing with outside of the field.
Yeah. I think that has a lot to do with building the culture of the team. And I mentioned that a little bit because to me, culture is everything. And it's one of the reasons we chose Oxy over potentially other programs was because of the culture. And I remember Liv and I talking about it very specifically. And there was one other school that she was looking at, and really it was one of her top schools to go play at. And we visited, and the difference between Oxy and that school, what it came down to and her making her choice was about the culture. She felt when she visited because it was a difficult school to get into, and they would always say, "Oh, you're so lucky to be here. You're so lucky to come to this school or be able to be admitted to this school." And Oxy was more about, "We're so happy you're here.
Mhm.
We're so lucky you're here." And she immediately felt that difference. And so for you, how would you describe the culture that you're intentionally trying to build at Occidental, and what does it feel like from the inside?
Like you said, culture is everything, and I think so many times it's really intangible. But when I think about this, I'm a big believer that our folks need a really safe environment in order for them to feel okay taking risks. And that risk taking and trying things new is where we find that point of growth. So, them feeling just like they can be their most true selves in our program around their teammates, myself, and our staff is the most important thing to me. So it sounds really silly, but like examples of when I know that I think we're there in the past on one of my teams, my players would, before every game, take a big breath together. And we learned this from a very silly, like, spring break trip, did yoga with
Mm-hmm.
a very woo woo,
Mm-hmm.
silly yoga instructor. And she made us all take one big breath together and just like scream, let it all out together. And my players would do that before every single game after that. It started a bit as a joke, but then like
Mm-mm.
became part of their identity and just like getting them in the routine of being able to just like be present in the moment. And the fact that they would do that in front of the other team, in front of
Yeah.
fans, and like
Yeah.
folks who were there to watch their games, just like told me that like they shed their armor. Like you said at the beginning of this podcast, like they had no embarrassment or like self-consciousness around each other. And that is just like the most special thing to me. And silly things like that kind of like indicate to me that we're on the right track in creating that atmosphere. A silly one from this Halloween is when two players dressed up for Halloween as Gru and Vector, like full um wig, a little belly for Vector, the full orange jumpsuit for Gru, like prosthetic nose, and like moments like that obviously make me really giggle, but also just like make my heart soar because I know that
Yeah.
regardless of their personality, it's even more so usually like the shy folks who will then show up in something like that, and you're like, I know that you feel at home here, and that is means
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, and you've created a safe space for them to be able to do that without fear. That's huge. Creating an environment where each person can be their individual selves and their best selves. When you can pull that together then and do rituals like you were talking about before a game, that helps, I think, ground them as one unit, and that we are in this together and we got this. And I think those things are so important, and you got to have fun, right? Like, because playing competitive lacrosse at this level is so difficult. And I think that if girls and young athletes in general can, instead of just looking at maybe the school or the accolades of the school or the prominence of the school, the prestige of the school, you look at the things that the coach is bringing to the team values and to the team environment. That's where you're going to be the happiest. And I've heard that over and over again from some players who've gone to play at some really big D1 schools that, they didn't realize, yes, they get to go there, but then they don't get to play, or the environment's really competitive and, the girls are mean to each other and things like that. What you've created and what I've heard is that it's just this cohesive group that can be themselves, have so much fun, but yet when the time comes, they're in there and they're ready to go. So one of the things I was wondering is, when you look back, like in your earlier coaching years, what's something you believed about leadership that you no longer believe, that you have been able to take over for yourself and become your own type of leader and coach?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a twofold. Coaching and leadership is not a one size fits all mold. So like early on, I'd be like, Sierra Slack, good to meet you. And then somehow, at some point, everyone would be calling me CC, even in a new program, like no idea. And so I was like, how can I be professional but be known as CC? But I just kind of realized, and by watching other coaches coach and a bunch of folks be different, I realized that we build really strong relationships with our players, and for that I don't think that, I guess I had a preconceived notion of, if I'm going to be a successful coach, I need to kind of be a certain
Yeah.
level of professional in the way that I'm presented. But I think you can still hold that with like having
Yes.
a nickname like CC, and like you said, having a ton of fun, joking in between drills, but then our players kind of focusing right in. And so, yeah, I feel lucky that I've just realized that I can be a little different, and
Yes.
that our players can find that balance, and they've taught me that.
It's amazing, because that's what then attracts future athletes to your program. And that's because Cece, I had to do this. I had to do the same thing. I thought, oh, I've got this title now. I need to be always professional, always buttoned up, always have all the answers, always know everything at all times. And that's not what people want when you are their leader. They want somebody that is authentic and genuine and doesn't have ego and doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but is willing to work together to figure out what those answers are and where we are going, especially like now the world's in chaos, let me just say, and for a whole lot of reasons. And I think having certainty, it's a safe thing for people to want to have, but you can't always have certainty. And I think that it's in the ability to be able to deal with ambiguity and grow and change and shift how you are and how you show up, like a leader, I'm not, listen, I'm as least buttoned up as you can get, because I like to have fun. But if you can show up as that kind of a leader, that attracts people to you, and they know then that they can trust you and that they will follow you. and they might not understand necessarily the what, but you help them understand the why behind it. That's a lot of times all somebody needs.
I agree.
So what's a moment that you had to choose between, because leaders, we have to do this all the time, choose between doing what was easy versus doing what was right for the team?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm doing this every single day
Yeah.
in the way that I know there are so many hard things that I have to do myself in order to prepare the team for the week ahead or the next month on just like the backside organizational and preparation side. So choosing the hard for myself in that regard, and then also choosing the hard for them, like looking at the week and knowing that we have a pretty long week ahead of us and our fitness maybe wasn't the best in our test 2 weeks ago. And so I need to make sure that I am hammering that into practice and making sure that even though it sucks to make them run or all that kind of stuff, just making sure that I'm still dotting our T's and our I's in the stuff that they
Yeah.
don't necessarily enjoy as much.
Yeah. Yeah. The run test. I hear about that. I think everyone I know that plays lacrosse on all teams or at least at the collegiate level know about that test. I was lucky enough to have Melanie Welch, who played for Boston College, on my team.
Mhm.
And she's amazing, amazing. And again, talk about the transition from being like an athlete to corporate. Athletes are incredible, incredible employees and leaders as well. Like immediately, you don't just because of what transfers from the field into the office. But she and I used to talk about that run test as well. It was not fun. But you have to do it, right? You
Mhm.
have to do it. You got to get your fitness in order to be competitive on the field. So one of the things I touched on this a little bit earlier is that, just again, this day and age for young adults, social media has made it so incredibly difficult for young adults just in the day to day. It's affected emotional health, mental health, how they feel about themselves individually, how they look, all of the things. It's terrible. I'm so glad I didn't grow up with social media. Just magazines did enough damage, I think, for my generation. We didn't need social media on top of that. But is there a conversation that you find that you continue to have over and over with the young women that tells you something about the world that they're navigating? Is there any topic that you find that you that keeps coming up with them?
Yeah. Yeah. Two things that I think we're always chatting on. One, the confidence piece
Yeah.
that you touched on. I think every
Yeah.
athlete needs something different to motivate them,
Yep.
but more and more I find our play like folks today need someone to assure them that
Yeah.
they have the skills and they have all the things behind their performance to set them up for success. So a lot of that mental work, I feel like I do a lot of that with our players and just making sure that they know that they have all of the reps going into a game that will make them successful. And we do so many reps at practice, so like they should know it. But I think that social media
Yeah.
part and
Yeah.
the day that they're growing up in really can have a huge toll in that. And then a different side of that with us being so kind of always having a screen between us. Something that we really try to focus on is being able to deal with conflict. So I think that's something that sports is a great avenue to gather tools to figure out how to directly and thoughtfully deal with conflict and have a resolution for the long-term well-being of a team. And so I'm always trying to figure out how to keep that in the conversation when we're talking about family. Of course, our student athletes would love to just like send a text or a quick
Yeah.
email rather
Yeah.
than have a face-to-face conversation. So as much as we can as a staff like encourage those face-to-face conversations and having the uncomfortable talks with folks when things come up, that that's something that I think are always hesitant to, but
Yeah.
once we push them to do it, they realize that it was the right thing.
Yeah. Oh, and both of those, both of the things that you use as examples. Like, first of all, perfection is not your goal. And I have learned over and over because I'm a perfectionist. I'm striving always to be, I think it's just in us, especially as athletes, to be your best on the field, to never screw up, to never make mistakes. And you know what? You're going to. And the best thing about that is what you do with it after. What do you do when the winning goal goes by you as a goalie, or the losing goal, I guess it would be if it's going by you on your team, or you drop the ball or you're not getting the draw, like all of those
Mhm.
things, it gets in your head of like, oh, I'm screwing up. Oh, I suck at this. What am I doing? And you can't let those voices in your head take over, because what happens is if you go, okay, you know what? I dropped this one. I'm not dropping the next one. And even if you drop the next one, you're like, I'm not dropping the next one. That ball is mine. Like, I'm going for it. You shift the focus that I'm going to learn from what just happened to me versus I'm going to dwell on it. And I'm going to let it spiral me into a place that I can't get out of, potentially this game or even the next game, because you're creating an environment where they are safe to make mistakes. You're not going to be screaming at them on the sidelines of, or yanking them if they drop one ball. It's like, you'll get it next time. You're going to get it next time. You give them the opportunity to pull themselves out of it. And yeah, there are times where if there's multiple things you need to have, they need to have a rest on the side or whatever to think about it. But I've seen you coach. I've seen you give that encouragement as they're coming off so they can take a minute, zoom out, like you said, and go, okay, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to let it ruin my game, or am I going to go back and go, I'll show you, like, I've got this. So I think that is so important, to create an environment where there's trust and psychological safety, where they can make mistakes, but know they have the support from you and the staff to go in, and they have the skills. They have the skills. They wouldn't be playing this level if they didn't have the skills to go in and do it. And the second thing you talk about around having those difficult conversations, this is a topic that is everywhere. Like, having difficult, like, even managers especially, avoid having those conversations that are difficult for them to have or that make them uncomfortable to have. So they avoid it. And that's the worst thing you can do. And you're right. There's no chance a text is going to solve it ever. A text or a DM or an IM in Teams, that's not going to solve it. Saying, hey, do you have a minute? Can we just talk about this? You can share the feelings in a safe space of how you're feeling. You can then help the person understand where you're coming from, because everybody makes up their own stories in their head of what's going on, and it's never accurate. I've found it's never accurate. And so you can meet it head on and then move forward instead of letting it fester into something that it should never have gotten to. And I'm glad that you are championing that on the team, because that's a life skill. That's a life skill you're going to need in any profession, because humans aren't going away. AI's coming in, but they aren't taking the place of human beings. And to have those EQ skills and self-awareness skills will take you so much farther. So thank you for teaching your athletes that, because that's so critically important. I want to shift a minute. What's one thing or something your players would be surprised to learn about you? Or do they know everything?
I don't know. I'm sure we have alumni weekend coming up this weekend, and I always
Oh,
shout
that's
it
right.
out, like, I'm sure they could learn some things on that weekend. But other than that, I think I try to keep myself as a pretty open book, and when like something comes up that kind of like throws me off in my own life, if it's something that I can share with them to just
Yeah.
clue them in to what I'm going through, I try to, because I think it's a nice reminder to them that I'm human too, and
Yeah.
there's things outside of just here, although I'm in the office today. I think about
Yeah.
Occidental almost 24/7, but I like to think that I am mostly an open book to them. So I don't
Yeah.
really know. I think this is a more question for them.
It's funny because there's things that are, I mean, my girls know about me, but like my team members and things like that, what's one thing that, is thinking you might not know about me? I always go back to the same one where in junior high and high school, I was
Mhm.
voted best hair back to back.
Wow, that's a good one.
And that was in the 80s.
You just
So
turned
let me
into a
be
brat.
very clear, very specifically the 80s hair.
Okay. Yep.
So
Yep.
I don't need to show you a picture because I'm sure
Okay.
you can visualize that. Very proud of that, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, and now I'm struggling just to keep my hair as I get older. um, so when you're having a hard day, what's a ritual or practice that brings you back to center that your team can learn to maybe do if they're having a bad day?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think here getting outside really always turns my day around, especially being in California.
Hmm.
And another one for me that like is just vital is having a strong coaching network. And so I have some of my coworkers here who are big support systems for me, along with some folks I will call. So I think, yeah, having your person that you can kind of just like maybe dump some things to, get it out, and folks who like really get it. Of course, I can like call a friend, I can call my husband and or sister, and they do tend to get it a little more because they kind of know my job a little more now. But like I try not to bring everything home to my husband because it's a lot that happens here, and so
Yeah.
having my friends in the office who are going through exactly what I'm going through as a coach has helped me kind of be able to like take that step back
Yeah.
immensely, and
Yeah.
they're huge supporters for
Well,
me.
it's nice to have that support network around you who knows you and can give you sound advice, whether you want to hear it or not in the moment. That, I mean, like me, I'm like, I don't want your or I don't want you to fix this for me because I'm in a funk. But the reality is, it always makes me stop and think later, and they can give a perspective that maybe you aren't able to come up with in that moment of emotion. I guess along a little bit of the same lines is that, as in any culture, you have to create accountability.
Mhm.
The last couple roles that I've had, first at Microsoft and then at ServiceNow, was really around setting the manager expectations of what we want at that
Mhm.
company, the manager to be, how we wanted them to show up. We would define what the expectations were. We would enable them for success, mapping towards those expectations. But the third piece, which is the hardest piece, is the accountability. How do you hold people accountable in any kind of environment that doesn't feel like punishment? And finding that balance, it's difficult. How do you create a culture where accountability feels like care and not punishment?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm learning how to do this all the time, and I try to really leverage my captains for things like
Mm,
this and my leadership for
yeah.
because they're living it. So I like to talk to them about what feels impactful to the team at the time as far as like consequences go. And I think that changes throughout years and like different groups that we have. So they're a group of folks who I love to pick their brain because they just have a little bit more of a pulse on what will actually matter or impact in that accountability piece. And then I think having already built trust with my players before is so vital in this because then I can always kind of return to conversations we've had before and I know them really well. So returning to like, I know that this is really important to you. Like, this is part of your identity on the team. You identify as someone who, whatever the case is, like, maybe, kind of just like returning to their own values and the things that really drive them as a person. So I think building that trust with them and getting to know them in that sense then can help you frame the conversation. Like, I know this is really, really important to you, but what you did really was quite the opposite of that. And I think, yeah, I think that can really help like drive the message home for them and not just a lot of times for us, since we're with dealing with team dynamics and friendships and um it's I deal with like the telephone, so and
Yeah.
so told me this and this, and then it
Yeah.
got to me, and then sometimes that the athlete is more looking for who to blame rather than and who told coach rather than
Right.
focusing on the actual issue. So I think sometimes like returning to things that I know are really important to them to motivate them and values that they hold high, then in within that to frame that conversation really helped me.
That's so smart, Cece. That's so smart because I think what you're doing is you're doing two things. You're building a culture of accountability where the team knows they're going to be held accountable for their actions because you care about them as individuals and you know what motivates and drives them. And you can see when there's a discrepancy with what their values are and how they're showing up. And I think meeting them in that point versus saying, you did this or you did that, like pointing the finger at them, you're having a conversation with them about it that resonates and would be more meaningful so that they could see it more clearly. And I think the second thing that you're doing by the way you're approaching it is you're creating self accountability. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that, well, it's hard for people to go, oh, this is on me. It's because you get defensive and you don't want to see like you screwed up or you're the jerk or any of those things. But instead, you're creating an opportunity for having a conversation or having somebody to go, okay, wait a minute. I own this. I maybe said this. And then instead of it going, oh, that person's the jerk because they told Cece, it's wait a minute, you're missing the whole point. It's actually, what did I do? What was the original reason that that person felt they had to go to the coach? Like, what was the experience or the way I was showing up? And so that then I can change my own behavior and instead of playing the victim. What gives you hope about the next generation of women leaders?
I think that my athletes surprise me every single day. Something that I'm just trying to echo to myself this year because of something an athlete said to me is just like, challenge folks and sometimes they'll rise. And
Yeah.
I find that uh yeah, there's so many little examples in my everyday life. I feel so lucky that my athletes will like rise to an occasion of something that, yeah, maybe I delegate to them or I just mention, and they really do. So um yeah, I don't know. I could give you a billion examples of when I don't expect it, but then I get a long, long email about some recruits and with a ton of details because I love to hear feedback on recruits, the
Yeah.
good, mostly the good.
Yeah.
And folks just tell me like, yeah, we liked them, and I'm like,
No,
I know
yeah.
them, but I want more. Or like
Yeah.
as simple as like our alumni newsletter that I asked someone to make it, and now every single month on the
Yeah.
first, it sent to me, and it's the cutest, sweetest thing ever. So yeah, I guess that's something that
Love
I've
that.
been returning to lately is just give folks the challenge
Yep.
and they might rise. And I think this generation does that more than folks
Hmm.
can give them credit for.
I absolutely agree. Those who are early in career right now, I mentioned Melanie Welsh earlier, like the most amazing employee. And it's because what you're doing is what I try and do is you try and give opportunities of empowerment. And you probably could do all of it. You don't have the time, but like you have an idea of what things should look like or how things should be
Mhm.
built or how things should go, or you have an idea of what that recruit is. But what you really want is to grow the leadership and grow the confidence in others by empowering them to make the decisions. And I tell you, every single time have done that, it always comes back 10 times better than I ever thought it was going to be,
Yes.
because you empowered them to be creative in an environment that wasn't fearful. And you're like, they know you're right there with them
Yep.
to support it. They might be freaking out because they're like, I've never done this before. I don't know what this looks
Mhm.
like. But you're like, just what would you want it to look like? What would you want this to be? And
Mhm.
if you need, like to bounce ideas off me, I'm here, but you don't micromanage them. You give them the opportunity to grow, build their confidence, build all their life skills that they're going to have. That's everything. And it's amazing. I think that again, this generation of kids, of youth, of young adults, they can do anything, and it's from a different perspective than what my generation wanted. And
Mhm.
I want that because I'm learning right along with them. So it's pretty incredible. Okay, last couple of questions, and then I promise I'll let you go because I know you have other things you need to be doing other than talking to me. But
Not at all.
I listen, I could talk lacrosse all day long. This has been my life as a lacrosse mom since Liv was
Uh-huh.
in the 3rd grade. And I, now that she's a senior, CC, I'm telling you, I might not survive. I might not survive it. Like
I've been getting very emotional lately about
I
them,
can't,
so
like, I can't. This has
oh
been
my
my
God, I
life,
know.
let alone her life. Right. So, um, but I cannot wait for this season. Okay. So if you could whisper one message into the ear of every young woman stepping onto the field for the first time as a D1, D2, D3 lacrosse player, or even just a young athlete like Liv was in the 3rd grade for the first time, what would you tell them?
Hmm. Yeah, I think to remind them that the folks around them either are or have gone through what all the feelings and emotions that they are going through, the uneasiness, the lack of confidence, the, diving into something new. I try to remind our seniors and juniors like, hey, remember that first years are really you're intimidating to them, and they sit here and go, how am I intimidating? So I just,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say, like, older folks don't always realize this, and so for the newbies, I think that really being able to keep that in perspective, that the person next to you has probably had the same exact thought and worry as you have, and telling them that might be able to help you, and opening that door to vulnerability can really just change everything for you to relate to them, get some good advice, improve and increase your relationship, and bond with them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so you're
And
not
become
alone.
a mentor. Like,
Yeah.
like have a mentor mindset where you are in the luckiest position. You've lived it now and they're just starting. How can you lift them to be
Exactly.
the greatest athlete and the greatest human and the greatest student they can be? Because they're, like you said, they're just as nervous as you were. They want to be great just like you did. And share them not just the greatness of the things you've done or the awards or the records you've broken and things like that, but the things that scared you, the things you were nervous about, the mistakes you made, so that they know that that's okay and that you're there for them. I love that. I love that. One of the things I've done is, it's in prototype right now, but I've created a leadership card game. And it's called Am I the Problem? It's a leadership reckoning card game. So it kind of goes with the podcast a little bit. And it's really about self awareness hurts, play
Mhm.
anyway,
Mhm.
work hard anyway at being self aware, because that's where it starts. I always say that in order for you to be a luminary for others and light the path for others, you have to be a luminary for yourself. You have to be self aware and understand what's driving and motivating you, what your values are. And so that's kind of what the card game's about, really holding a mirror up to yourselves and maybe see your blind spots that you hadn't seen before. So, and I think we kind of answered this question, but I'll just ask it again. What's a leadership habit you inherited from other coaches or coaches you've had in the past and had to unlearn it? because it was either not you or it wasn't helpful, or you knew you wanted to shift the direction as how you were as a coach?
Yeah, I love that word reckoning. I'm having a reckoning with my office right now. I zoomed out and showed you everything. I've done the dumping. I need to do the purging and reorganizing now. So that's hop off. But yeah, I mean, you kind of hit me at one of those perfect times where I'm like, we're in preseason and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always learning and growing as a coach. So something that I'm really reckoning with right now is kind of like the energy piece of coaching. And maybe there's a better or a different way or a different side to describe this, but I one okay, so twofold. One, I'm reckoning with just like when I'm not always there energy wise, or maybe like step away from a practice because someone just got hurt and now the trainer needs to fill me in on what's going on. I really feel the intensity, the communication, the loudness, all of that. I feel it drop in practice. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot, is how to kind of like clue in the rest of my staff to help me raise that up, clue in
Yeah.
our players to also realize that drop in quality or intensity if like I can't, be right in there giving all of the things and affirmations. And then two, just making sure that I'm asking the right questions of myself. Like you just said, am I the problem? So yesterday we had a really tough practice. It just nothing was going right in any of the practice. I was like, we just did this drill last week, guys. Why can't we get it now? We did it 4 days ago and it worked really well. I planned this whole practice. It was supposed to flow into each other. And so just like getting myself into the habit of, in those moments when I'm like a little frustrated or
Yeah.
disappointed, that's something that I put a lot of work into, is not going the way that I expect it to go, expect our athletes to be able to do something in, to instead of blaming them and saying, I know you can do this. Why aren't you doing this?
Yeah, it's hard.
To
Yeah.
kind of ask myself, like, how can I change this drill in the future to make it so that the team can be successful? Or what does the team actually need in this moment? I know I planned this whole practice, but seems like they're pretty tired, or maybe they need a drill that is really geared towards making them be successful, or that they know a little better so that they can kind of have a physical reset. Or one of our assistants pulled over the defense and asked them to just focus on one specific skill during that drill, and that really locked them in. So that was something I took a quick mental note of that's a tool I could try next time, to just
Yeah.
like have the group focus and really be bought in on one skill in this drill. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's I reckon with the fact that I dictate a lot of that energy and quality piece a lot. And so making sure that I'm asking myself the right questions about what the team needs, and not always yelling at them, or I'm not really a yeller as it is.
Yeah, you're not.
But
No, you're not. I've seen yellers. You're not a yeller, which is nice. They get it without the yelling,
yeah,
which is kind of awesome. And I
not
love
being
that
yelled
because
at.
that shows your self-awareness as
Yeah.
a coach. That shows you not, when sometimes it's easier to go, come on, you guys, like you shouldn't be dropping the ball right now. Like you shouldn't be dropping the ball ever. What's
Yeah, and
going on?
sometimes
Or
they need that, but
yeah,
also
yeah,
sometimes a different tool or
right,
strategy can work. And so,
right,
yeah, I'm trying
right.
to gather a nice list of those and make
Yeah,
sure that, um, you know, I'm collaborating with them. I'm not just there to tell them, why can't you do this? If they're not doing it, it's because I'm not teaching them or setting them up for success.
that's incredible. And then back to like our self-awareness conversation and our personal accountability, conversation from earlier. They probably know themselves too. They don't want to be dropping the ball. what they're probably saying in their heads, why are you dropping the ball? Like, what the hell is going on? Which then sent them into that spin. But like, you being self-aware enough to know that you can change a drill and maybe then build the confidence just by doing something a little bit differently. I think that's amazing. The other thing you mentioned that we didn't talk about a little bit, or we didn't talk about this conversation, was just around your coaching staff, because I think you alluded to it in a few different answers, but just the fact that you've empowered them and created a staff that feels like a cohesive unit, right? Because that's another difficult thing to do. It's one thing as the head coach, and it's another as a staff to come together so that the players don't see a fragmented, not cohesive staff or set of coaches that are there for them. It's not like they're gonna, mom's gonna scream at me, so I'm gonna go tell dad, or or there's this division between you coming as a united front, and that you are all grounded in the same values and the same mission for the team, which you've alluded that you've done, and empowering them that if they need to stop a practice and pull their, section of players to talk to them, you're good with that because that's their area of expertise and you're empowering them to do that, not just the athletes. And so kudos to you for doing that, knowing that that's really important, that your staff feels just as supported and that you are one amazing cohesive unit, lucky enough to lead this group of girls. So as we close, again, I just want to thank you so much for stepping into this space with just such honesty and heart, and showing us what it looks like to lead young women with both courage and conviction and deep care. And for reminding us all that leadership isn't just what happens on the field, it's who we become in the moments that no one sees. And those self-awareness moments that you are growing for every individual that comes to play with you into these amazing adults that are going to be self-aware and human-centered and kind to the world. So I thank you for that. And to everyone listening, take a moment, notice what made you pause today, what challenged you, what moved you towards what's next, because reckoning isn't a one-time event, it's a practice. It's a way of leading that asks us to return to ourselves again and again. So until next time, keep the lantern lit and keep doing the real work. Thanks. Thanks, Cece.
Thank you.